Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast, the weekly Torah portion podcast where I read the weekly Torah portion, then provide my own interpretation of what I think it all means. This week's Torah portion is Teitzei, falling on the 11th of Elul, 5784, September 14th, 2024. It begins with chapter 21, verse 10 of Deuteronomy. I'll be reading along in English via Chabad.org's translation if you'd like to follow along there. And as always, I'd like to remind everybody I'm not a professional Torah scholar, just somebody who wanted to study the Torah. Let's begin. First portion, chapter 21, verse 10 of Deuteronomy. If you go out to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God will deliver him into your hands, and you take his captives, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her, you may take her for yourself as a wife. You shall bring her into your home, and she shall shave her head and let her nails grow. And she shall remove the garment of her captivity from upon herself, and stay in your house, and weep for her father and her mother for a full month. After that you may be intimate with her and possess her, and she will be a wife for you. And it will be, if you do not desire her, then you shall send her away wherever she wishes, but you shall not sell her for money. You shall not keep her as a servant, because you have afflicted her. If a man has two wives, one beloved and the other despised, and they bear him sons, the beloved one and the despised one, and the firstborn son is from the despised one, then it will be on the day the husband bequeaths his property to his sons, that he will not be able to give the son of the beloved wife birthright precedence over the son of the despised wife, the real firstborn son. Rather, he must acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the despised wife, and give him a double share in all that he possesses, because he, this firstborn son, is the first of his strength. Then he has the birthright entitlement. If a man has a wayward and rebellious son, who does not obey his father or his mother, and they chasten him, and he still does not listen to them, his father and his mother shall take hold of him, and bring him out to the elders of his city, and to the gate of his place. And they shall say to the elders of his city, This son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He does not obey us. He is a glutton and a guzzler. And all the men of his city shall pelt him to death with stones, and he shall die. So shall you clear out the evil from among you, and all Israel will listen and fear. All right, that's the end of the first portion. So starting off strong here, we've got rules on captive women. If you see from the conquered people after you go to war, a woman among them who you find very desirable and you want to take her for a wife, there are rules for that. You can do so, but you have to let her live with you in your house and make her shave her head and let her nails grow long. And also, don't bother her basically for a month. Let her grieve for her parents. Then, as she's removed this garment of her captivity once you bring her in and she's had that chance to grieve, after that is said and done, you're allowed to pursue the relationship and marry her, right? Be intimate with her and so on, and she'll be your wife. But if you decide, you know what, actually I changed my mind, I don't want this woman, you send her away, and you don't do so as a slave. You don't sell her for money. Instead, you simply set her free wherever she wants to go. Why? Because you've afflicted her. And if you think about it, I mean, this is a good example of she perhaps was a chaste virgin and then no longer was because of this person. It's only right that you don't make her life worse after you've put her through all of this and then don't even keep her for a wife. So anyway, then it goes on to inheritance law pertaining to two sons, right? So let's say you've got two wives, one that's awesome and one that's not so awesome. But the one that you don't like as much ends up having your firstborn child. The rules are regarding the firstborn that the firstborn must get double the inheritance despite you liking the other mother more. So this is really interesting because here we are saying this, yet the Torah itself fills us with stories of patriarchs who do the opposite. So first off, we find out that Abraham has two sons, right? At the beginning, he has Ishmael and then Isaac. Isaac gets the inheritance. So that's one example. Then Isaac, he has two sons, twins. And of course, the second-born ends up managing to take the inheritance of the firstborn through trickery and trickery again, but nonetheless, he was officially going to be given the full inheritance, as he should be. Next up, we get to the 12 tribes, right? We've got Jacob, and he's got his 12 sons. And it's interesting because he clearly favored Joseph the most, and this is reflected in a number of ways, but here we see in no uncertain terms the firstborn son is the chosen one to receive everything or receive the double portion of what everybody else would get. Now, moving on from there, we talk about a wayward child, or a rebellious son, who does not listen to his parents, right? So he's just an obstinate, rebellious child who causes trouble, and they talk to him, and he refuses to change. Then they're going to bring him before the elders of the city and say, this kid right here, he sucks. He's a bad kid. He is a glutton and a guzzler, right? So I think this is kind of referring to somebody who doesn't pull their weight and is basically a burden unto the household. This is not acceptable, so they are to be pelted to death with stones. And you clear out the evil from among you is the language used there. Now on to the second portion, chapter 21, verse 22 of Deuteronomy. If a man commits a sin for which he is sentenced to death, and he is put to death, you shall then hang him on a pole, but you shall not leave his body on the pole overnight. Rather you shall bury him on that same day, for a hanging human corpse is a blasphemy of God, and you shall not defile your land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. Chapter 22, verse 1. You shall not see your brother's ox or sheep straying and ignore them. Rather you shall return them to your brother. But if your brother is not near you, or if you do not know him, you shall bring it into your house, and it shall be with you until your brother seeks it out, whereupon you shall return it to him. So shall you do with his donkey, so shall you do with his garment, and so shall you do with any lost article of your brother which he has lost and you have found. You shall not ignore it. You shall not see your brother's donkey or his ox fallen under its load on the road and ignore them. Rather you shall pick up the load with him. A man's attire shall not be on a woman, nor may a man wear a woman's garment, because whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. If a bird's nest chances before you on the road, on any tree, or on the ground, and it contains fledglings or eggs, if the mother is sitting upon the fledglings or upon the eggs, you shall not take the mother upon the young. You shall send away the mother, and then you may take the young for yourself, in order that it should be good for you, and you should lengthen your days. Okay. End of second portion. So a quick recap. A death sentence, if the man is put to death, you're going to hang him from a pole. But don't leave him hanging there all night because God does not like that. So yes, do that, but then bury him the same day. Now it moves into the next chapter talking about if you see, for example, somebody's pack or work animal straying from the path. It's basically like it's gotten loose. What you're supposed to do is rather than ignore it, you're supposed to bring it back to the owner. Or take it to your house until the owner makes himself known, and so that you can be like, oh, I found it actually, here it is, let me return it to you. So, same thing with any of his animals, and so on, his lost article of clothing, or just any lost item, you must return them to the owner by this particular criteria, even if you don't know who it belongs to, and when the person speaks up saying they're missing it, that's how you get it back. Now, another thing, right, if the beast of burden, like a donkey or an ox, is carrying something, and it's just too much weight and the animal can't bring it themselves forward, you have to help, right? This is a requirement. So let's say the guy is trying to move something and the animal just can't handle it. You have to lend a hand. Now, beyond this, it suddenly transitions over into cross-dressing. Men shall not wear woman's clothing, and women shall not wear men's clothing, because it says it's an abomination. Now, moving on to a totally off-topic subject, it seems, again, just unrelated, a bird's nest. So let's say you're wandering down the road and you see a bird's nest. Well, the rules are, rather than you killing the mother, what you can do is, it says you shoo away the mother, and then you take what's in the nest for yourself to support you. But you shall not take the mother upon the young. So in other words, don't take the mother that's sitting on top of the eggs or the newborns, but you can take them for yourself, and they'll help prolong your life because it's nourishment, right? Okay, moving on to the third portion, chapter 22, verse 8. When you build a new house, you shall make a guardrail for your roof, so that you shall not cause blood to be spilled in your house, that the one who falls should fall from it. You shall not sow your vineyard together with a mixed variety of species, lest the increase, even the seed that you sow and the yield of the vineyard both, become forbidden. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. You shall not wear a mixture of wool and linen together. You shall make yourself twisted threads on the four corners of the garment, with which you cover yourself. If a man takes a wife, is intimate with her, and despises her, and he makes libelous charges against her, and gives her a bad name, saying, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I did not find evidence of any virginity for her. Then the girl's father and her mother shall obtain evidence of the girl's virginity, and take it out to the elders of the city to the gate. And the girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man as a wife, and he despised her. And behold, he made libelous charges, saying, I did not find evidence of your daughter's virginity, but this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. Then the elders of the city shall take the man and chasten him. And they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, because he defamed a virgin of Israel. And he should give it to the girl's father, and she shall be his wife. He shall not send her away all the days of his life. But if this matter was true, indeed no evidence of the girl's virginity was found, they shall take the girl out to the entrance of her father's house, and the men of her city shall pelt her with stones, and she shall die. For she did a disgraceful thing in Israel, to commit adultery in her father's house. So shall you clear away the evil from among you. If a man is found lying with a married woman, even both of them shall die, the man lying with the woman and the woman. So shall you clear away the evil from Israel. If there is a virgin girl betrothed to a man, and another man finds her in the city and lies with her, you shall take them both out to the gate of that city, and you shall pelt them with stones, and they shall die. The girl, because she did not cry out, even though she was in the city, and the man, because he violated his neighbor's wife. So shall you clear away the evil from among you. But if a man finds the betrothed girl in the field, and the man overpowers her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. Whereas to the girl you shall do nothing. The girl did not commit a sin deserving of death. For just as man rises up against his fellow and murders him, so is this case. Because he found her in the field, the betrothed girl had cried out, but there was no one to save her. If a man finds a virgin girl who was not betrothed, and seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, the man who lay with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the girl's father, and she shall become his wife, because he violated her. He shall not send her away all the days of his life. Chapter 23. A man shall not take his father's wife, nor shall he uncover the corner of his father's cloak. A man with injured testicles, or whose member is cut, may not enter the assembly of the Lord. A bastard shall not enter the assembly of the Lord, even the 10th generation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord, even the 10th generation shall never enter the assembly of the Lord, because they did not greet you with bread and water on the way, when you left Egypt, and because the people of Moab hired Balaam the son of Beor from Pethor in Aram Naharaim against you, to curse you. But the Lord your God did not want to listen to Balaam. So the Lord your God transformed the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loves you. You shall not ever seek out their welfare or their good all your days. Thus concludes the third portion. So a quick summary once again. First up, when you build a house, make sure you put a guardrail on the roof so that nobody dies falling off of your roof. Don't mix the different things in your field, right? So don't mix, let's say, crop type 1 with crop type 2, because then what comes of it, the crossbreed, will be forbidden. Don't plow with an ox and donkey together. Don't mix wool and linen together. You shall make yourself twisted threads on the four corners. So that's the tzitzit, right? So we have a long list of things you're not supposed to do involving mixing two distinct different things. No cross-pollination here. Now, next up, we see about a man who, he takes a wife, but then, lo and behold, he now starts hating on her and saying bad things about her, saying, oh, I married her, but turns out she wasn't a virgin. There's no proof she was a virgin. Well, now this goes to the family of the newlywed wife, and she will be presented. Whether there's evidence or not, the parents of the woman must present evidence that suggests she was in fact a virgin, and so, for spreading a false claim about her, her family receives compensation, and he has no option to ever break away from this woman because of the slander that he did. Now, if it is determined the opposite is true, that she is not a virgin, then the woman instead will be killed. She's going to be pelted with stones because of adultery, right? So sexual misconduct. While she was supposed to be a maiden living in her parents' home, she went out and did something unscrupulous and thus defiled herself, or was defiled, however you want to put it. Also, the man, if he is wrong, I forgot to also, they are also going to chastise him for what he did, for having spread a false rumor about his own wife. Now, beyond that, we move on to more forms of adultery. So if a man is found lying with a married woman, both of them are killed. That way you wipe the evil away. If there's a virgin girl betrothed to a man, and another man comes along and lays with her, then they shall be killed as well, because this is in the city specifically. The idea is if she is basically being attacked, right? So a guy comes up to her and imposes himself upon her, it's her responsibility to call out for help, right? Because she's in the city, surely somebody will be able to help her. But nonetheless, because she did not call for help, it's basically treated as her cheating on her soon-to-be married husband, and so if she's been violated, it's no longer the case. They're done for. Now, here's an example of the opposite case for her. She's out in the field, and she's happened upon, and this man assaults her, and she's not able to call for help because she's out in the field, right? So this is basically a case for what to do when someone is raped. So she's betrothed, right? So she's supposed to get married, and then the guy rapes her, and she has no way to call for help. Then the man is killed because of what he did, right? He will be put to death. The woman, however, is forgiven. And as it says here, you shall do nothing the girl did not commit a sin deserving of death, for just as a man rises up against his fellow and murders him, so is this case. In other words, her victimhood is on par with how the victim of a murder should be viewed. So it's a pretty serious crime. And it was because she was by herself and there was no one who could help her. Now, if the girl is a virgin who's not promised to somebody else, and this happens, and he lies with her and they're found, then the man is instead required to pay her family 50 shekels, and then she is to marry him because he violated her. He shall not send her away. So he's stuck with her for life. Now, the next is chapter 23. So it's talking about, you don't take your father's wife, nor uncover the corner of your father's cloak, right? So this refers to uncovering your father's nakedness, as it's been said in previous portions. This is the same concept. Also, it's talking about who can enter the assembly of the Lord. So eunuchs of either variety are not allowed. A bastard is not allowed either. So up to the 10th generation basically is language meaning never ever. Same thing with the Ammonites and the Moabites. They shall never ever be allowed in 10th generation because of how they treated you and because of how they hired Balaam to try to stop you. But remember, God helped you despite that, and also never seek out their welfare or their good all your days. So basically, forget those people, never help them because of what they did. On to the fourth portion, chapter 23, verse 8, Deuteronomy. You shall not despise an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not despise an Egyptian, for you are a sojourner in his land. Children who are born to them in the 3rd generation may enter the assembly of the Lord. When a camp goes out against your enemies, you shall beware of everything evil. If there is among you a man who is unclean because of a nocturnal emission, he shall go outside the camp. He shall not come within the camp. And it shall be towards evening he shall bathe in water, and when the sun sets he may come within the camp. And you shall have a designated place outside the camp so that you can go out there to use it as a privy. And you shall keep a stake in addition to your weapons, and it shall be when you sit down outside to relieve yourself, you shall dig with it, and you shall return and cover your excrement. For the Lord your God goes along in the midst of your camp to rescue you and to deliver your enemies before you. Therefore your camp shall be holy, so that he should not see anything unseemly among you and would turn away from you. You shall not deliver a slave to his master, if he seeks refuge with you from his master. Rather, he shall be allowed to reside among you, wherever he chooses within any of your cities. Where it is good for him, you shall not oppress him. There shall not be a prostitute of the daughters of Israel, and there shall not be a male prostitute of the sons of Israel. You shall not bring a prostitute's fee or the price of a dog to the house of the Lord your God for any vow, because both of them are an abomination to the Lord your God. You shall not give interest to your brother, whether it be interest on money, interest on food, or interest on any other item for which interest is normally taken. You may, however, give interest to a Gentile, but to your brother you shall not give interest, in order that the Lord your God shall bless you in every one of your endeavors on the land to which you are coming to possess. When you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay in paying it, for the Lord your God will demand it of you, and it will be as counted for you as a sin. But if you shall refrain from making vows, you will have no sin. Observe and do what is emitted from your lips, just as you have pledged to the Lord your God as a donation, which you have spoken with your mouth. All right. So now conclusion, or rather a summary of the fourth portion. So we talk about the Edomites and the Egyptians. Edomites are really technically your brothers because of their heritage, and also Egyptians, they deserve some respect too because you dwelled among their land. So 3rd generation away from that, they can join the congregation. Now, here we talk about war. So when a camp goes out against your enemies, beware of everything evil. Basically, the conditions to having God fighting alongside the Israelites in battle is that their conditions at home, in camp, are perfect. Basically, God will not support anyone in battle who does not have a wholly perfect congregation at home. So some examples of things to beware of. A man who has a nocturnal emission, right? So he wakes up and, looks like there is some reproductive fluid involved. So he has to leave the camp and not be among the camp. In the evening, he can take a ritual bath, bathe in water, and then when the sun sets, he can come within camp. And then outside of the camp, also latrines, the toilets, right? So in addition to your many weapons and so on, so this is again for the soldiers specifically. These are rules of conduct for the soldiers. So you've got latrines outside of the camp, and keep with you a stake that you can use to dig the ground and cover up your excrement, right? Because even it says God will be among you, so don't leave things like poop in the middle of the camp. All right, we don't want that. He doesn't want to see it, so make sure you bury it outside of camp. Beyond that, it also is a reminder, any unseemly thing among you would be a reason that he would no longer defend you or fight beside you, so make sure that things are perfect for God. Then we move on to the matter of a slave seeking refuge from his master, so you're not allowed to turn the slave over. In the context of, let's say, American history, right, they used to have this thing where with runaway slaves, and people would either turn them in or they would not. In this case, the Bible suggests, the Old Testament suggests, the Torah suggests, if a slave is running from his master, you let him. You support him. Allow him to reside among you within any of your cities. Do not oppress him. Then it says no prostitutes, male or female, allowed. And you will not use the money associated with prostitution to do any sort of honorable thing for God, right? Don't bring the fee or the price of a dog. I guess it's a comparison. So yeah, you basically don't bring those in because it's an abominable source of money. Then it talks about interest. So you're not allowed to use interest financially when it comes to dealing amongst the children of Israel. But if it's outside of the community, so usury is allowed if it's with non-Jews or Gentiles, but it is not allowed among the community. So that's very interesting. Usury became this iconic aspect of worldwide Judaism, or Jewry was assigned usury in a lot of these places that forbid it amongst their population, but they would let these outsiders do it. So here we see they're not supposed to do it from each other or to each other. Now, the last thing we'll talk about here is that when you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay in paying it. So if you say that you will do something and you swear it upon God or before God, you are now bound. There's no backing out of it. So instead of you taking the sin onto yourself, just don't make vows. That's a much better deal. Just don't make promises like that. Do not make a vow upon God, and there will be no sin. Safety, no issue. And it says, just be careful, watch what you say, and what you've pledged to the Lord, and make sure that you do exactly those things, but the easiest way around it is simply don't do that. So now on to the fifth portion, chapter 23, verse 25 of Deuteronomy. When you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat as many grapes as you desire, until you are sated, but you shall not put any into your vessel. When you enter your neighbor's standing grain, you may pick the ears with your hand, but you shall not lift a sickle upon your neighbor's standing grain. Chapter 24. When a man takes a wife and is intimate with her, and it happens that she does not find favor in his eyes because he discovers in her an unseemly moral matter, and he writes for her a bill of divorce and places it into her hand and sends her away from his house, and she leaves his house and goes and marries another man, if the latter husband hates her and writes her a bill of divorce and places it into her hand and sends her away from his house, or if the latter husband who took her as a wife dies, her first husband who had sent her away may not take her again to be his wife, since she was defiled to him, for that is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin to the land the Lord your God gives you for an inheritance. All right, fifth portion now done. Really short and sweet, though second half of it not so sweet in content. So the first thing here, it's saying that when you go to your neighbor's yard, right, where he's got his grapes, the vineyard, you're allowed to take as many of the grapes as you want on site. So like, let's say, treat it like you're eating it off of the vine, but you're not allowed to take any in a little bag with you. So in other words, while you're there, it's okay for you to eat directly from the vine, but don't start collecting them to take home. That's where you cross the line. But if you just want to have a little snack, go ahead and pluck from the vine. That's allowed. Same thing with grain. You can pick it with your hand, but don't harvest it with a sickle, right? So this is a very similar situation. You're basically not allowed to reap the harvest, literally, of another person's crop, but while you're there, you're allowed to, with your bare hand, take some for yourself. Now, talking about this married man thing, so he takes a wife, they're intimate, so they've sealed the deal now, they've consummated the marriage, and then suddenly, for some reason, he discovers there's some sort of moral issue with this woman. He wants a divorce. Okay, they get divorced, some other guy marries her. Now, once this other guy has married her and consummated the marriage, under no circumstances may she return to the first husband. Whether she is divorced again or the new husband dies, the first husband is not permitted to be with her ever again. Because if you do, that's a sin and it's abominable before the Lord, and he can't have that in the Holy Land. Now moving on to the sixth portion, chapter 24, verse 5. When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out in the army, nor shall he be subjected to anything associated with it. He shall remain free for his home for 1 year, and delight his wife whom he has taken. One shall not take the lower or upper millstone as security for a loan, because he is taking a life as security. If a man is discovered kidnapping any person from among his brothers of the children of Israel, and treats him as a slave, and sells him, that thief shall die, so that you shall clear out the evil from among you. Be cautious regarding the lesions of Sarat, to observe meticulously, and you shall do according to all that the Levite priests instruct you. As I have commanded them, so shall you observe to do. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way, when you went out of Egypt. When you lend your fellow Jew any item, you shall not enter his home to take security. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you are extending the loan shall bring the security to you outside. And if he is a poor man, you shall not lie down to sleep with his security. You shall return the security to him by sunset, so that he may lie down to sleep in his garment, and he will bless you, and it will be counted for you as a merit before the Lord your God. All right, so first up here, chapter 24, verse 5, talking about when a man has now taken for himself a new wife, he is exempt from military service for a year, and anything related to it. Why? Well, let's think about it. This gives him time to actually try to have a child, right? So that's the logic there, I'd say. Now it says, when it comes to taking securities for a loan, do not take the lower or upper millstone, because he is taking life as a security. So I can only assume the milling stone or the millstone is a necessary component for farming and for things like that. So by taking that, you're now making the person unable to sustain themselves, and thus you're essentially killing them. So that would be taking a life as a security. Kidnappers, if you take somebody and you kidnap them, if you sell them or make them a slave, you're put to death. So you cannot do that to your fellow Israelite. And this is very clear. It's evil. Legion of Tzarat. So once again, we remember that this happened, as it specifically says, remember what happened to Miriam, right? So if even Moses' sister, a prophet, could be subjected to punishment for what she had done, be very attentive to any instances of Tzarat breaking out among the congregation, and observe meticulously, according to the traditions of what must be done. Beyond that, this is the last thing about securities, right? So this is an example of a loan. I will loan you 100 shekels, but to make sure that you're not going to rip me off, give me something as collateral, a security. So it says that when you take a security, don't go into the guy's house to take it. Instead, you stand outside and let him bring it to you. This is just a matter of respect. Beyond that, this is also in the case of a poor man, you cannot take whatever security that he gives you and keep it overnight. So the logic here is let's say he gives you his blanket as a security. It's all he has. He's poor. So now, are you going to really have him sleep all night without the one thing he needed? No. So at night, you're going to let him take his blanket home, and then he'll give it back to you the next day. And because of this kindness, he will bless you. And it will be a merit. So in other words, God's going to put it on the balance sheet as a good deed that you did. Now on to the seventh portion, chapter 24. Verse 14 of Deuteronomy. You shall not withhold the wages of a poor or destitute hired worker, of your brothers or of your strangers who are in your land within your cities. You shall give him his wage on his day, and not let the sun set over it, for he is poor, and he risks his life for it, so that he should not cry out to the Lord against you, so that there should be no sin upon you. Fathers shall not be put to death because of sons, nor shall sons be put to death because of fathers. Each man shall be put to death for his own transgression. You shall not pervert the judgment of a stranger or an orphan, and you shall not take a widow's garment as security for a loan. You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I command you to do this thing. When you reap your harvest in your field, and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to take it. It shall be left for the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, so that the Lord your God will bless you in all that you do. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not deglorify it by picking all its fruit after you. It shall be left for the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. When you pick the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean after you. It shall be left for the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt. Therefore I command you to do this thing. Chapter 25, verse 1. If there is a quarrel between men, and they approach the tribunal, and they, the judges, judge them, and they acquit the innocent one and condemn the guilty one, it shall be, if the guilty one has incurred the penalty of lashes, that the judge shall make him lean over and flog him in front of him, commensurate with his crime in number. He shall flog him with 40 lashes, he shall not exceed, lest he give him a much more severe flogging than these 40 lashes, and your brother will be degraded before your eyes. You shall not muzzle an ox when it is threshing the grain. If brothers reside together and one of them dies having no son, the dead man's wife shall not marry an outsider. Rather, her husband's brother shall be intimate with her, making her a wife for himself, thus performing the obligation of a husband's brother with her. And it will be that the eldest brother who performs the levirate marriage, if she can bear, will succeed in the name of his deceased brother, so that the deceased brother's name shall not be obliterated from Israel. But if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, the brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, My husband's brother has refused to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He does not wish to perform the obligation of a husband's brother with me. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him, and he shall stand up and say, I do not wish to take her. Then his brother's wife shall approach him before the eyes of the elders, and remove his shoe from his foot, and she shall spit before his face, and answer him, and say, Thus shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's household. And that family shall be called in Israel the family of the one whose shoe was removed. If two men, a man and his brother, are fighting together, and the wife of one of them approaches to rescue her husband from his assailant, and she stretches forth her hand and grabs hold of his private parts, you shall cut off her hand, you shall not have pity. You shall not keep in your pouch 2 different weights, one large and one small. You shall not keep in your house 2 different ephah measures, one large and one small. Rather, you shall have a full and honest weight, and a full and honest ephah measure, in order that your days will be prolonged on the land which the Lord your God gives you. For whoever does these things, whoever perpetuates such injustice, is an abomination to the Lord your God. And you shall remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you went out of Egypt, how he happened upon you on the way, and cut off all the stragglers at your rear, when you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore it will be, when the Lord your God grants you respite from all your enemies around you in the land which the Lord your God gives to you as an inheritance to possess, that you shall obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens. You shall not forget. Thus concludes the 7th portion. Now for the final recap here. So first up, wages. Do not withhold the wages of a poor or destitute hired worker, right? So this applies not just to Israelites, but anybody who's a stranger in your land also within the cities. You have to give him his payday, and it's very clear why. By working, especially if he has nothing, right? So every dollar or shekel, every bit of work he does is for the sake of his survival. So for you to deny him his wages, you're literally threatening his life because he needs that money to survive. Now on to the next step. Fathers and sons shall not be put to death for the actions of each other. A man is held accountable for his own transgression. So it's interesting because we hear how the Lord remembers iniquities and so on to the 3rd or 4th generation, but remembers good deeds up to the 1000th generation. But it is not the same as saying that a father or son should be put to death for his child's actions or father's actions. And this is actually very significant. So I'll give a historical context. In ancient Persia, there's a fine example of one of Darius, his cohort, those who were there when he ascended the throne. One of them disrespected him in a very great way by basically barging in when he was supposed to not be disturbed. So as punishment, he not only killed this guy, but also killed his entire family, except for the wife. The wife was allowed to live. And the sons were all killed with the father, except for one, which for the sake of the story I won't go too much into. The wife is very clever. She manages to get her eldest son spared. But in this case I just told there, because of the sins of the father, the son was punished. And the same thing with Xerxes of Persia, right? The father asks, "Oh, Lord King Xerxes, can I please keep one of my sons with me to take care of me instead of sending him to your army?" And what does Xerxes do? He cuts the guy in half as punishment. He cuts the son in half and has the army march through him to just say, "How dare you disrespect me by asking that question?" So here we're seeing that the actions of a father or a son will not reap death upon the other. And that's very significant. Again, in the time period, you have to remember that sort of thing was very common. Now, beyond this, perverting judgment of a stranger or an orphan, nor take the widow's garment as a security. So basically, you have to treat these people with dignity and respect and not pervert justice, even if there's somebody who's not somebody that you would necessarily be vouching for yourself, right? An orphan doesn't have anybody, and a stranger is no connection to you. And a widow's garment, well, that's just a matter of both emotionally, perhaps it's tied to her family that she lost, and also you're taking away something that's a matter of dignity to take her clothes from her. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt. The Lord your God redeemed you from there. He commands you to do this thing. Now, here's another thing related to this command, right? So if you forget your sheaf in the field when you're harvesting, leave it be. The stranger, the orphan, and the widow, they're the ones who will find it and take it, and God will bless you for leaving it there. When you beat your olive tree, do not deglorify it by picking all of its fruit after you. So what it's saying is, let's say you bring out a basket. You fill the basket as you were planning to, but you see that there's some extra stuff from the olive tree on the ground. Don't go back and make sure you get all of it. Like, no, leave the extra behind. That's, again, for the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. And finally, grapes in the vineyard. Once again, pick your grapes, but, accidentally dropped one. Oops, dropped another one. Don't pick those up. Leave them on the ground for the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. Remember this because you were a slave in Egypt, therefore you do these things. Now, next up, we get a very interesting case. So 2 men are fighting, and the wife of one of them wants to save her husband, so she runs in and grabs the genitals of the attacker. Her hand is supposed to be cut off for doing this. Now, we can express this as being one of 3 reasons. 1, by seizing his private parts, she's grabbing him at his brit where there is the circumcision, right? So that's a holy thing to be grabbing. She shouldn't be touching that. 2, she's touching another man's private parts, which is inappropriate in terms of defilement. 3, this is his reproductive stuff. So, just like animals are not supposed to be harmed in their reproductive organs, and a person whose loins are damaged cannot serve in the congregation, by touching them, she has basically crossed a certain line she shall not cross. So don't take pity on her. She loses her hand. Now, jumping back to the beginning of this chapter, another quarrel between men. They take the case to the judges, and the judges determine this guy's innocent and this one's guilty. He's been condemned to receive the punishment. He's going to be flogged right then and there in front of the judge, commensurate with his crime and number. He shall flog him with 40 lashes. He shall not exceed. So, in other words, by going over 40, this would now degrade this man before people, and it's not right to do that. So he will not be degraded more than 40 lashes, or else that would be just excessive and it would diminish his social standing. Do not muzzle an ox when it is threshing the grain. I don't know the rules behind that, other than maybe it's so that the ox has the opportunity to eat while it's working, right? So he's allowed to eat from what his labor is. It's just courteous and polite and kind. Now we have the rules of the levirate marriage. So if, let's say, you got these 2 brothers who live together, and then one of them dies, and his wife that never had a child, then the brother is supposed to take on the wife and give her a child so that his brother's name can be prolonged. We saw a story of this happen in the case of Judah's sons, which both died, and finally she ended up getting the baby from Judah rather than the sons. But the case is, remember the naming convention is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? So it's Jacob, or Yaakov, son of Yitzhak, son of Avraham, right? So in this case, if the man never has children, then there is no son of him. So what will happen is the levirate marriage will have his brother give a child to the dead man's wife, and then that child will be, instead of his child, will be named the son of his deceased brother, so that his name will not be erased from the people of Israel. Now, if he says, I don't want to do that, then she is supposed to tell the judges, my brother-in-law, he doesn't want to do it. He says he will not perform the obligation and give me a child. And then he has to come in and say, I don't want to do it. So then she's going to take his shoe off, and then she'll spit before his face. So either spit in his face or spit on the ground in front of him. Thus shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's household. And it will be a shame. His family will be called the family of one whose shoe was removed, meaning this man was unwilling to give his brother a child to succeed and keep his name alive. I already mentioned the details referring to the woman grabbing the other man's junk, inappropriate. And then we go into keeping different weights. So basically, you need context. You shall not keep in your pouch 2 different weights, one large and one small. What is that referring to? Well, at the time, we have scales and things like that now, but let's say you were measuring out, the weight of, yes, I would like a pound of chicken. Okay, well, how much is a pound? Well, I have this 1 pound weight in my pocket. Let's use this. And then you'll see, okay, they're equal on the scale. So having multiple weights means, yes, I have the actually 1 pound weight, and I also have one that's not actually a pound, but I say it's a pound, so I can rip people off. So you're not allowed to do that. Same thing with the measuring for ephah, right? Your measures must be accurate. It's about being fair and just with your measurements. Have an honest and full weight and a full and honest ephah measure, because if you don't, you'll be cast off of the land, right? It says so you can prolong the days that you will be on the land, which the Lord your God gives you. Those who don't, abomination. Finally, another reminder, Amalek must be destroyed. Never forget what Amalek did when you left Egypt. This is something you shall not forget. When all is done and you are settled into the land, the last thing you got to make sure you do, don't forget, obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens. Thus is to punish them for what they did when you left Egypt. With that, we're at this week's portion's conclusion. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, a lot of information about the final last-minute rules and regulations according to what Moses has to say in his final speeches before the end of his life and the end of the Torah. So rules relating to everything from taking a war bride to how you will handle your inheritance among your children, even if you like one wife better than the other, how you should treat slaves, how you should treat unruly children, what you should do after somebody's been sentenced to death, what you shall do with the neighbor's wandering animals, how you should handle your spouse, how you should handle somebody who commits sexual assault. So many different things are covered in this portion. It's extremely important material, and really, I think some of the most clear-cut rules and regulations relating to a number of the laws that will be perpetuated in the Holy Land once they arrive. So, without further ado, that's been Teitzei. I think really a very important portion overall. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you'll tune in next time. This has been Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast saying, as always, once again, Baruch Hashem.